Tribe, I'm so excited that we are going to be speaking with the awesome Jo Moseley, who is a joy encourager, midlife adventurer, and beach cleaner.
I'm a mum of two sons. We live on the edge of the Yorkshire Dales. When I say we, that's where my boys and I have lived for about 13 years now. My eldest son has finished his master's and is working, and my youngest son is at university. And so at the moment, it's just me. I'm in that empty nest stage, just on my own on the edge of the Dales. I'm a paddleboarder, sort of just do lots of different things. But I think paddleboarding is probably my greatest joy at the moment in terms of adventures and outdoor things.
Jo, I'd love to hear more about your childhood and growing up. Did you come from a sporty family? Did you have any siblings? Were you brought up in the city? What were you like as a child?
Okay, so I am the third of four children, and we come from North Yorkshire, so not far from where I live now. My mum wasn't really very sporty at all. My mum used to love swimming, but she wouldn't put her face in the water kind of swimming. And my dad, though, is a sailor, a diver, and has always loved the sea. In fact, he only gave up diving in his late 70s when the doctor said to him, look, I can't think of why I need to tell you to stop diving, but the fact that you've had 3 types of cancer and something wrong with your heart probably tells me that diving and going to depth isn't very good for you anymore. So you probably need to stop. And he was in his late 70s at the time. So, the outdoors and mainly the love of the sea comes from my dad. And as a little girl, I was what we would, in those days, we would call someone like me a tomboy. Now we would just say they were a girl that liked being outdoorsy. But I used to play with the boys, throw myself in the sea, ride my bike. I mean, I used to be able to go and ride my bike. I remember when I was 6 or 7, my mum would just say, yeah, just go off, do your own thing. No helmet, no worries about the traffic. And climb trees, not a very good skateboarder, but tried. So yeah, that's what I was like as a little girl. And that love of the sea came very much from my dad.
One of the first ways that I actually came across you was on Twitter with your handle Healthy Happy 50. But I'd love for you just to share maybe a little bit more about what life was like for you sort of in your 40s, what you were going through.
Ooh, okay. So in my 40s, I got divorced, became a single mum. So early 40s, not so great, if I'm honest, quite difficult. And it all sort of came to a head in my late 40s, I think. We'd been through my dad having his first 2 types of cancer. And by that point, my mum she then had lymphoma. And I remember very clearly one day just being totally overwhelmed, totally stressed. I hadn't slept for months. And I was in the supermarket in Tesco's in the biscuit aisle, and I just stopped and put my bags down. And I said to my boys, I can't do this anymore. I just can't do this. I just want to sleep. I just want to not feel on edge the whole time. And we were shopping for food for my eldest son's Duke of Edinburgh Award. And obviously 2 teenage boys were just like, whoa, get this woman out of Tesco's right now. This is so embarrassing. But yeah, by early 40s, not great. I was going through my divorce and all that stuff. Late 40s, the menopause. I realized in hindsight, I was probably starting with the perimenopause, which is probably why I was so anxious and not sleeping. A different person, really, a different person to the person that you see today.
I was reading in your blog when, you wrote you were tired, you were anxious, you were stressed, you were basically totally overwhelmed by life.
Yeah.
How did you get through that? What did you do?
I remember telling a friend, and I sort of recounted it as a kind of, guess what happened in Tesco's, silly me kind of thing. And she said, how much exercise do you do? And I said, well, and I realized that I spent a lot of time running my boys around. I would spend a lot of the weekend standing on the side of a rugby pitch. But actually taking time for me to exercise consistently, I didn't really do that much. I would go for walks. I've always gone for walks, but there was never anything very sort of much about me. It was always just trying to look after my parents, trying to look after my dad and mum, and I'm trying to look after the boys, keep the money coming in, keep food on the table. And so she said to me, I think if you do more consistent exercise, it might help you sleep. And she was giving away an old indoor rowing machine that was either going to go to the tip or to a charity shop, but she diverted it to me. And she said, maybe if you row, it might help you sleep. And literally, Sarah, within the first couple of weeks on this really cronky old indoor rowing machine, I did it every night in my kitchen. And I was sleeping and I was like, wow, this is extraordinary. You know, my whole day is dependent on how much sleep I get. And also, I'm just so meticulous about my sleep now and sort of like, you know, after 10 o'clock, you will not see me out. And so I realized that exercise was just a huge, huge factor in my well-being. And then that led to starting to look after myself. And then I went on to do a big indoor rowing challenge for my mum, or in my mum's memory when she died.
From hearing you talk, and I know so many women listening will get it. You know, you're working, you've got bills to pay, you're putting food on the table, you're looking after your children, you're a single mum, you're caring for your parents, they're going through cancer at the time, you're putting everybody else first. Almost how women have been trained. You've got to put everybody else first, and things like sleep and your exercise, you know, it almost does go on the back burner and it doesn't matter. I mean, part of me is almost thinking, you know, I imagine, you know, when your friend suggested doing exercise, it could have almost gone one of two ways. One, that, okay, yes, she's right, I need to take more of a priority. Or like, oh, great, there's something else I need to do. How am I going to fit this into my life? I'm already sleep deprived and doing everything else. I mean, one of the problems that I hear from many women, it's the starting. So you've got this exercise bike. You've got the rowing machine. How did you start?
Literally, I mean, I think I was just so desperate. And she didn't say, oh, exercise. She just said, look, try it. She didn't make a big deal of it. She just said, just try it, just see. So there was no pressure. There was no sense of this will happen if you do it. There was no expectation. There was just desperation and no expectation. So it was like, just start, just see. And so I just literally did that. I think I must have Googled, you know, how do you row? Like, you know, how do you do this thing? And what do you do with this thing? And what are you meant to do? And I literally just started with absolutely no expectation, but just a real hope that it would help me sleep and it would help me not be so anxious. So it was never about getting fit. That never came into it. It was just literally, will it make me feel better and will it stop me crying in supermarkets because I just can't keep embarrassing my sons? And so it was just that very simple thing. So when people say to me, or women say to me, what should I do? And I just say, just start today completely as you are, no pressure, no massive goals, no extra special kit, no big expectations that it's going to change your life or do anything. Just start today as you are right now and be kind to yourself. That comes from how I started, and I never thought it would lead to where it would lead to.
Tell me more about the fundraiser that you ended up doing in memory of your mum.
When my mum died, about sort of 7 or 8 months after this, she died just before Christmas on the 21st of December, 2013. I was in the middle of, it was like a fundraising thing with Concept 2, who make the indoor rowing machines that I'd moved from my cronky one in the house to a proper gym. I actually teach at that gym now, which is a really lovely thing to do. And they had said something, if you row a certain distance over December, they would give money to charity. And I had started this in the beginning of December. And when Mum died, I found sort of after Christmas, I was still going back to the gym to row. And it seemed like a really odd thing to do when I was grieving. But what I realized that it was helping me. It was a place I could go that gave me solace, that I knew made me feel good, that helped me sleep. And so I carried on doing that. And then I went to bereavement counselling. And the bereavement counsellor, who was just extraordinary, he said to me, how does it feel right now? And I said, I feel like I'm standing in the middle of a really old rickety wooden boat in the middle of a lake. And my old life is the shore around this lake. And I'm standing there waving at my old life, wanting it to be safe, wanting it to be secure, wanting to know what would happen next, because Mum was such a massive part of our lives. She'd helped me raise the boys. She was, larger than life. She was glamorous. She was everything. And he said, and I said, every time I think that life's gone a bit steady again, this wave just comes and hits the boat and I'm rocking. There's no sense of stability. There's nothing. And I don't know how to get back to that old security that I had in my life, emotionally and everything. And he said, what do you need to do? And I said, well, I need to sit down and row back to the shore, row back to my life. And obviously, I meant it metaphorically. And he was like, okay, so, let's talk that one through. And what I realized was actually maybe I could do something physically with rowing, given that had been how I had expressed it to him. And about 3 weeks later, with absolutely zero planning, and having never really rowed more than about 2,000 to 3,000 meters each time, I decided that I would start a massive fundraising challenge for my mum. And I decided to row 1,000,000 meters and a marathon. Started on the 5th of May, which would have been their wedding anniversary. Finished on the 21st of December, which was the first anniversary of her death. Rowed 10,000 meters every other night for 8 months, 2 half marathons, and then a marathon 5 days before my 50th birthday. And we raised just over £10,000 for Macmillan Cancer Support in her memory.
Oh, that's fantastic. And to break that down, that's rowing 10,000 meters every other night for 200 days.
Yeah, I don't know how I did it. But I think it was just the power. I think it was just the power of kind of love, really. It was like, and also I read, I do read kind of books about grief and things. And there is a lot about how your body wants to move and wants to allow I think the grief had sort of settled really deeply in my bones. And I think there was other grief from my divorce, and I'd had miscarriages and things. And I think grief had like settled into my bones, into my muscles kind of. And I needed to move. I hope that doesn't sound too woo-woo, and I needed to move to let it out. And rowing was just really a beautiful way to do that. And just going to that rowing machine in the gym and doing it every other night after work it just made me feel so much better and helped me feel like there was some way I could bring some good out of this huge amount of loss.
Yeah. And you raised a huge amount of money, raising £10,000 is incredible. And
yeah. Yeah, I was chuffed. And people said to me, I'm going to sponsor you because it sounds like the most boring thing you could ever do. And it wasn't like, some people have these great fundraising things where they can send back pictures and, mountains that they've climbed. And, this is what the money is for. And all I did was go to the same rowing machine every other night and sit there in a gym. I had no great photos to show anybody. I had nothing other than just me just sweating it out. So they sponsored me, some people, because it was just so boring, and they thought, wow, good on you for being boring.
At the end of that challenge, completing it, how did it make you feel? Was it like drawing a line in the sand? Had you reached the shore? Had you gotten out of that rickety wooden boat?
I think I'd reached, God, that's such a good question. I think I'd reached the beginning of the beginning. I think I'd reached the beginning of a new journey, and I wasn't going back to the old life, and I wasn't going back to the old me. I had wanted the security of the old me, but I think it was you're going to make me cry. I think it was the start of a new journey, and there was a line between the past and the future, but I didn't know where that journey was going to take me. And it's been a kind of unfolding journey as I've gone along. So I think it was the start of a new shore. Yeah, I think it was the start of something. There was definitely a point at which I said, gosh, I didn't think I could do that. I didn't think I was very brave. I didn't think I was very strong, but I did that, and let's see what we can do next.
And it was, 5 days before your 50th birthday.
Mm.
How was turning 50 for you?
I was a bit tired physically and emotionally. I didn't have a big party. I was with my family. It was the second Christmas without mum, but it was like the first one had just been, we were in shock. So we were all getting used to that. I think I've just always been grateful to get to 50. 2 or 3 years ago, I went through a time when quite a number of my girlfriends died, some closer to me than others. But so I've always seen the idea of being 50 as something to cherish and to celebrate and to be grateful for. And so I'm just really grateful for it. And I was excited. I was quite glad to see the back of some of my 40s. It was like, okay, that had been a bit of a wild ride. So yeah, let's start afresh. And it felt different. It felt different to being in my 40s. I think your 50s, you do kind of reset and you say, okay, this is it. You know, I'm closer to 70 than I am 30, and let's keep making the most of it. So yeah, just grateful to be. And now I'm in my mid 50s, so just very, very grateful.
Yeah. One of the things that you've talked about was sort of like perimenopause and going through the menopause. I'd love if you could just share maybe a little bit more about your experience of the menopause. It's something that I'm trying to talk about more with guests who are at that age or going on that journey, because it's not something we don't really hear a lot about.
Yeah. So for me, I had this image that it was all hot flushes and it would happen somewhere in my mid 50s. And that was literally all I knew. And so when I look back and thought, maybe in my late 40s, and that's one element of why I was crying. And I think, well, when did that all start? Maybe 46, 47. And I don't have hot flushes. I have cold flushes, which basically feels like my mum always used to say, I'm shivering, like someone's just walked over my grave. And it's that kind of, and sometimes my cold flushes just turn into being permanently cold. So I've never had a hot flush, and I am incredibly grateful for that. I thought it was all very much physical symptoms. I didn't realize there were so many physical symptoms. But for me, it was really the emotional, it was the anxiety. I've always been a worrier, but this went off the scale worry, stuff that would keep me at night at 3-4 in the morning. I would imagine I could go from one situation to catastrophe in 10 easy seconds. I was constantly worrying about things, constantly feeling like the world was about to end and it was all my fault. And then for me, there are the really weird physical things, such as very itchy, scratchy legs. However much moisturizer you put on, you feel like you're just covered in ants. Tinnitus. So I get the ringing in my ear, which when we talk about the paddleboarding, I got when I was in the middle of a tunnel paddleboarding last year and thought a boat was behind me, and actually it was my own ringing in my ear. My eyes would be incredibly dry. Gosh, what else? Lack of sleep, anxiety, overwhelm, stress, just feeling so tearful, like literally I could cry at anything. But also my poor boys, there were times when I would fly off the handle and have no idea why. And I just remember sometimes we'd drive home and I could hear them in the back going, okay, I'll put the kettle on. I'll make her a cup of tea. You get the chocolate out. Somebody put the candle on, put the fairy lights on, just anything to keep her calm, And I regret, I didn't realize, I just thought it was all part of being a single mum and looking out for mum and dad. But that element of just literally flying off the handle at them for nothing particularly important. And then going, oh my gosh, I'm not an angry person, but I just would blow up. Not remembering everything, like right now I can't remember all the other things I've gone through, but there's just this list and you go through it and you go, oh my god, that's right, that happens to me, all sorts of things that, like, estrogen is in so many different parts of your body and you don't realize the effect that it has. So yeah, and the other, heart palpitations. So along with my anxiety, I would also have these palpitations in my heart, so it was just like on edge the whole time. My knees, all my bones would ache, all my joints would ache. Things don't taste the same sometimes. I mean, all sorts of things. And you just think, oh my Lord, is this it? Is this ever going to end? And at the time, although now menopause talked about hugely, back 7 or 8 years ago, even then it wasn't. So I was just kind of searching stuff out and learning about it along the way. And that's why I'm happy to talk about it, because I don't want other people to be in the dark. So if anything I say ever says to someone, oh God, I'm not alone, I understand that other people feel that way, then hopefully that's reassuring to them.
How did you manage your menopause?
By the time I'd finished the indoor rowing, I knew that exercise was massive for me. And I knew that looking after myself was going to be hugely important to me, and I had to do that. I had to put myself on the to-do list. I had to put myself on the priority list, and if I didn't, I was going to go back to crying in supermarkets, and I don't think my boys could cope with that anymore. So for me, exercise has been massively important. All sorts of exercise, anything that brings me joy. So if I love it and enjoy it, I'll do it. I don't have like massive particular fitness goals other than to be able to do the things I like doing. And obviously I do stuff to keep my bone strength up because of osteoporosis, which again is something very important for menopausal women. I do stuff I love. So like I love kettlebells. I love going to kettlebell classes. Putting myself on the list, going to bed. I'm so strict about my bedtimes. I don't drink tea after about 4:00. I just drink hot water. I try and eat like good stuff that they say you should eat, but I don't get, particularly terrified about if I don't exactly eat what they say. I try to be cool about that. I guess I try and just bring into my life good things and be around people that uplift me. And another thing is to say no to stuff, which can be really difficult, when you're the one that always goes, yeah, I'll bake the cake for the, parents association. Yeah, I'll man the stall. Yeah, I'll do this. Yeah, I'll do that. Yeah, just ask me. No worries. I'll just add it to my list. I've had to learn to say no. And that's really difficult. But I'm learning to say, no, I can't do that. Or I've done that for 5 years. Can someone else do that now? I don't take HRT, but I don't think that's because I'm doing anything particularly well and somebody isn't doing anything well. I think it's just your body. Some people need it and some people don't. And it's not like a value judgment whether you do or not. It's just a thing that is. So, yeah, and a lot of women sort of meditate. I don't meditate, but I do meditate in the sense of I go out and do kind of mindful things outdoors, which for me is my meditation. I just try and do all the things that people say and hope for the best sometimes.
Tell me more about what brings you joy.
Well, outside of all the normal stuff that brings me joy, like my family and my sons, my friends, obviously my adventures bring me joy. Just being outdoors, particularly in or on the sea or anywhere that's a body of water like a canal or river or reservoir, and just being there in the moment, doing those things. Usually also involves litter picking. That brings me joy. And I like making films about the things that bring me joy. I actually just this week won an award for my third little film. They are all around just adventures and I get a huge amount of joy from taking other women out on a paddleboard on the canal. I've done it a few times and it's just like, it just fills my heart when I see them, particularly if they haven't paddleboarded and they're like, wow. And, even if they're still on their knees after an hour and they don't feel quite confident enough to stand up, I'm just like, my heart is just like, wow, you get what it feels like. And they're like, yeah. So that brings me a lot of joy as well.
Tell us more about your paddleboarding journey. When did you start on the paddleboard and when did you sort of start taking it to the next level?
So 25th of September 2016 was my first paddleboarding lesson. And I had injured my knee earlier in the year. And I'd read that paddleboarding was really good for strengthening your core, but it didn't have a lot of impact. It's not like running or whatever. So I knew that my knee, as it started to heal, paddleboarding could be quite good for it. And I had started a project for myself in that month in September called Rain or Shine 30, which was that every day I would get outside for half an hour and sort of enjoy the benefits and just make a note of what I saw, what I did, how I felt. Because by this point I could start to walk properly, whereas before I'd been on crutches and things. So I took this lesson 25th of September, and I genuinely remember the minute I stood up very cautiously, but I stood up and I looked out and we were in the Lake District and I thought, oh my gosh, I love this. I absolutely love this. I've always wanted to learn to surf, but I knew that I was no way fit enough at that point. And paddleboarding was much more accessible because you don't need to be by the sea. There's so many other places you can paddleboard. And I just thought, wow, this is extraordinary and I love it. And there's a picture of me afterwards and the smile on my face is just huge. And I was like, yep, I love it. And my family bought me a paddleboard for my Christmas and birthday present that year. Everybody kind of joined in, and I was just off. That was it. I loved it. I just loved it. And I mainly do it on my own. And it just gives me a chance to get out and do something and be totally free.
Tell me about Paddleboard the North, where the idea, well, first of all, sort of explain what it is and where the idea came from to do this challenge.
Okay, so Paddleboard the North was a challenge I did last year, 162 miles coast to coast from Liverpool in the west to Goole in the east, Goole being the most inland port in the on the east coast. And I was going across the Leeds-Liverpool Canal and the air and cold navigation. So through Merseyside, Lancashire, Yorkshire, and then in Leeds, you change onto the River Aire and the navigation, which is like a river that's been kind of canalized, so it's slightly tamed, but there is an element of the River Aire where it's not tamed. And I actually had the idea about 2 months after my first paddleboard lesson in 2016, and I was like, I'm going to be the first person to paddleboard coast to coast, and woo, look at me. I had this idea. I told someone at a party, a Christmas party, and I didn't know him particularly well, and he didn't paddleboard. And he said, oh, that sounds really boring. And also, for a woman of your age, it's probably too difficult. And logistically, it's quite difficult. And I put the idea away, Sarah. I just said, oh, he's probably right. Actually, my other challenge was, very contained. I could just go to the gym. I didn't need anybody to support me or back me up. Maybe nobody will be part of this with me. And he's probably right. And so I put the dream away. And then, as I said, I carried on with all my little adventures, getting my confidence on the paddleboard. I would swim in the sea. I did actually learn to surf for 4 seconds. I stood up on a surfboard, and that, my greatest surfing achievement ever. But I carried on doing all these things. And at the same time, as I said, a number of my friends died. And I remember just thinking to myself, as Mary Oliver said, you get one wild and precious life. Nothing is certain, and you have to make the most of it. And so this little dream, I just kept it like in the back of my head, in my heart. It was just growing in my heart. And then when I realized in January 2019 that my life was going to change again, when my youngest son would be going off to university in the October, that I needed a big dream to pull me to the future, really, that I would be an empty nest mum, and what life was going to be like, I didn't know. And I didn't want my boys to think, oh, mum's on her own and she's all a bit sad. So I decided that I would bring the dream out again, and I would bring it to life. And this time I wanted to fundraise, and I wanted to litter pick along the journey.
I'm so angry with that man. I'm like, oh.
Yeah, I sort of am, but I
hope you never saw him again.
Oh, no, don't worry. I do see him. But I sort of am, and I'm sort of not, because I think there is that phrase to trust the timing of your life, and in a way, if I'd done it back in 2017 as I planned, I think it would have been about proving to myself that I could do something. It would have been about the achievement of it. It would have been about getting to the end and saying, I did that. Not look at me, but I did that. Wow. When I did it in 2019, I had already got to the point in my life that I didn't need to fulfill that element of it. I didn't need to prove to myself that I was enough by achieving something. Through various different things, I'd realized that I am enough and I'm going to do this. It wasn't about proving to other people that I was strong or women are strong. I knew that. I'd learned that in the intervening 2 years. I'd seen enough kind of other women doing really cool things. I didn't need to prove that women could do stuff. I didn't even need to prove that I could do stuff. And so when I did it, it was about literally enjoying the journey, enjoying the dream, enjoying every element of it, even the bit that was hard. And also this time I wanted to fundraise for 2 really important charities to me, and I wanted to pick up litter. I wanted the journey to serve another purpose other than just being my own dream. And I don't think in 2017 I would have had that element of service to kind of the plastic pollution cause or to the charities that I raise money for. And I think I needed to grow up a bit in those 2 years, even though I was in my 50s. I needed to just realize it wasn't about proving anything. It was about serving something.
Tell us more about the journey. So planning it, organizing it. Did you need to get funding? How long was it going to take you? Tell us a little bit more about the lead up to the start date.
The first thing I needed to do was ask for time off work. So it was my summer holiday. I have to pay the bills, etc., etc. So I just had to say at some point, I'm going to do this, and this is when I'm going to do it, and I need to ask for time off work. It doesn't sound very adventure-y, but that's sort of the basic. And I wanted to do it very specifically when my sons were both doing other things, because I didn't want them to feel like this was about me asking them to celebrate their mum. It was about me saying, boys, you do your stuff, I'm going to do my stuff, and it's all okay. Don't worry about mum. So I specifically timed it when they were doing other stuff. And once I had that date in my diary, I knew that I would then work backwards. I just had to say to myself, right, I've got 11 days, including the weekends. I have to break 162 miles down. So it worked out at about, hopefully, 15, 16 miles a day with room for rest days. I never had any rest days. And I'm going to start on a Saturday, finish on a Tuesday. It was so... I read somewhere in Rosie Swale Pope's book, I think it's something like, you have these dreams, but facts make dreams possible. Something really profound, sort of simple but profound. And it was like, you need facts. And so I needed just to have facts about what I was going to do and make this dream into just a logistical thing that I had to stand by. So I literally said, right, these are the stopping off points along my route. I need somewhere to stay. I didn't want any funding for it because I already had very kindly been given an amazing paddleboard by Bluefin, who gave me this gorgeous 12-foot paddleboard, who is called Grace, who has been, an absolute joy. Was like a cruise ship going along the canal, so steady. So I didn't want funding. It was my holiday. I was going to pay for everything. I booked hotels. I'm really notoriously bad at asking people for help. So I booked some B&Bs on either end of the journey. Some friends from Twitter asked if I'd like to stay with them in the middle. And then for 4 days, I stayed at home and I arranged because the canal comes through Skipton where I live, and I arranged for a friend's daughter to collect me, bring me back to my house, collect me in the morning and take me back. So it was just really methodical and really like, this is where I'll start. This is where I'll stop. And then this most incredible thing happened about 2 or 3 months before I started, when somebody that I had met on Instagram and then met at the Women's Adventure Expo, I think it was the one where you and I met. She was a photographer at the Women's Adventure Expo, and she said to me, out of the blue, we kept in touch from that. And she said, Jo, I'd like to come and make a film with you. And she's called Fritz Sarita Tam, and she's a filmmaker. So she said, I'd like to be part of this. And that ultimately became like this incredible extra element to the journey, if I'm honest, just incredible.
What was the most difficult aspect of the journey once you were out on the waterways paddling?
I mean, there were the things that everybody would say was difficult. Okay, there was the weed, which really it was this chickweed that would, I can't remember if it's chickweed or duckweed, duckweed. And it's like this green carpet of stuff on the top of the canal, and it would get under my fin and it would pull me back. So I spent quite a number of days on my knees paddleboarding along, not stand up. I didn't dare stand up because if I did, I would rock back and possibly fall in. We had thunderstorms and lightning, and we had rain for the first 2 days, and all my friends were texting me saying, are you going to postpone? Are you going to delay? There's all these sort of floods and things like that. So there were those physical things. The hardest part was, it didn't feel hard. I know that sounds really silly, but it didn't feel hard. It felt like a dream come true. So there were the physical elements that sometimes made me cry, sometimes made me think I can't do this. I had a couple of sleepless nights. But once I was in it, I was literally living my dream. I met a little boy on the 3rd day, and it was the first sunny day, and he and his grandma and his brother were running along the towpath, and he went, hi, what are you doing? And I said, oh, I'm traveling to the other side of the country. And he was like, wow, I've been on a paddleboard. And I was like, wow, that's so great. And then he looked at me, and he can't have been more than 10 or 11. And he said, you are living your dream. And I went, I am. I am living my dream. So even though there were elements that were hard, in comparison to the opportunity to live my dream, all those just kind of faded away, really. It sounds really ridiculous because some days I paddled 25 miles and it was hard, but it wasn't hard. It was a good hard, if you know what I mean. It was like I'm doing something I want to do. So yes, it's hard, but it's not overwhelming.
And on the paddle, you're actually doing more than just paddling on this journey. You also, I believe, continued your litter picking. So you're a plogger and you do like a 2-minute beach clean. Share more about that. What was it like being on the canals with regards to the amount of litter?
In some areas it was worse than others, but it always came down to the same things. Plastic bottles, and mainly energy drink bottles, and very often half drunk energy drink bottles. And then there was, crisp packets, sweet packets. And I knew that I couldn't take everything. We are going to go back and pick up. I'm talking to Bluefin and we're having like group pickups and things. But so I just took what I could. And then sometimes people along the way would say, oh, look, I'll just take that with me. I'll take it home and recycle it, or I'll put it in the bin and then I could catch up and take more next day. But what I was trying to do was just record what I saw just so I could show people. I videoed it, our local BBC regional programs. So I was recording what I was showing and then they put that out. I think at the beginning of this year, it had already been seen almost 300,000 times on their Facebook page alone. So it was about showing people what was there. Because sometimes if you're on the towpath, you think, oh, the canals are quite clear. But actually it gets under the branches and under the bits where you can't reach. So sometimes it was quite hard because when you get to a lock, you have to get out. Obviously, at a lock, you can't take your paddleboard like the boats do. So you get out and you carry it around. So sometimes when I would be carrying Grace, my board, and then I'd, be loaded up with plastic bottles and in my bags and things. So sometimes that was physically quite difficult. But it was important to me to keep, because I was raising money for the 2-minute beach clean charity, it was important to me that I showed what was happening and showed that I was doing my litter picking each day, and that I hopefully showed the beauty of the canals, but also what we were doing to the canals in some areas where it was just so laden with plastic. And these beautiful little moorhens would be literally trying to build their nests, and you would see the ducks and they would be sort of swimming amongst a whole pile of plastic. So it was important to me that I continued to do my litter picking every day.
Did you ever feel as though you have been discriminated against because of your age? Obviously, apart from that comment from that person who we're not going to talk about. How much was age a factor, or was it not?
I think there's always that element of kind of an internal story we tell ourselves that we're too old. And there were times where I'd go, oh, I can't do this. I'm too old. And actually, it wasn't that I was too old. I just was tired that day. So I think there's always that internal, was I discriminated against? On the canal, yeah, actually, there were a few times. 98% of the people on the canal were amazing. Amazing. They would just say, hey, how are you doing? What are you doing? I remember different times when I was paddleboarding into Leeds, and there was guys on their mountain bikes kind of coming along the canal, and then they kind of thumbs up. And then one of them found me on Twitter and he was like, oh my God, I didn't realize that was you. And how he found me on Twitter, I do not know. But there were a few times a small handful of people questioned my ability. They were men about my age or a bit older. One chap said, do you go through the lock on your paddleboard? And I went, no, thinking, you do realize that's a really silly question, because why would you do that? I can pull it out. And he turned to me and he goes, oh, you're a wimp. And I thought, that's really a stupid thing to say, because a paddleboard going through a lock is really a stupid thing to do. Another chap said to me, when you fall in, you will need to go to to the emergency department because you will get Weil's disease. And I was just like, well, I paddled like 90 miles already. I haven't fallen in. And actually, that isn't the case. And then a couple of guys laughed at me. And then one chap said, where have you come from? What are you doing? And I said, well, I've come from Liverpool and I'm on my way to Goole. And again, by this point, I traveled about 90 miles, I think, 70, 80, 90 miles. And he was like, yeah, right, in your dreams. And I was just like, what? Why would you say that to somebody? Why would you say that to somebody who has not done anything to you? Why would you try and criticize someone? So at the beginning, I kind of took it to heart. And by the end, when somebody was a bit rude, I was just like, yeah, okay, mate, that is the way, I just sort of stood up a bit more for myself. And then as I came into Goole, there was this row of fishermen and it was a beautiful sunny day. And I said, how far from Goole? And they were like, not far. And they almost like clapped me and they were like, go on, lass. And so, as I say, most people were amazing, but there were just that small number of people that said things that just weren't very pleasant. So maybe they would have done that with a woman of any age, or they would have, I don't know. I don't like to think that I don't know. I don't know the answer, Sarah. I just thought they were a bit stupid, really.
Reflecting back now on that experience of paddleboarding the North, how has that impacted on your confidence and your self-belief?
Oh, hugely, hugely. I am not the most self-confident person in the world. I doubt myself at every turn and always have done. And I have held myself back from so many things in life because I thought I wasn't good enough and that I wasn't brave enough, that I wasn't strong enough, that good stuff wasn't necessarily kind of on my cards, really. I always just, walked around with this belief I wasn't good enough. And so it's really helped me believe that I can do things. And it wasn't for me the feeling that I finished it. It was the feeling that I started it. That's what I'm proud of as much as finishing it. I'm obviously proud that I finished it. I'm proud that I'm the second person to do it and the first woman. I'm proud that for women of my age, we can say, hey, look, we can still do hard things. And I'm proud of all that. But I'm proud of all the money we raised. I'm proud of the film that we're making. I'm proud that we talked about plastic pollution. But I'm also just really proud that I even dared to dream it, and that I not only dared to dream it, but that I backed it with action. And now I don't feel so bad about starting stuff because I kind of believe that I can trust myself to do something. And I can say, yeah, you have a dream and you can back it, and you just need to keep believing in yourself. So the triumph, as I've said before, the triumph is in the starting it. The triumph is in saying, I'm starting something and I'm going to back my idea, because so often women, particularly women of my generation, and I love that younger women don't seem to suffer this as much, but women of my generation, putting ourselves first is the hardest bit. Putting our dreams first is so hard. It's so not what society expects of us. We put everybody else first. So to put myself first, even though I felt so selfish about it and so almost irresponsible, that's what I'm proud about. I'm proud that I said, yeah, I did that. And I just hope that I can kind of be an example to people that it's okay to put yourself first. And it's okay to say, my dream is important. And the world doesn't crash if you take, 2 weeks off mothering duties, and I waited till my sons were over 18. I just felt that responsibility. So yeah, it's built my confidence and it's made me think that I am kind of good enough.
Absolutely. And you are good enough. 100%. What else have you started after that or since then?
So I made a couple of little films before, and then I made another little film last December, and I made it really quickly because I only had a week's time to do it in for a particular film festival. And what I realized was it was again the process and enjoying the journey and saying, I'm going to enter this film festival. I may get selected for the festival or I may not. I didn't even think about winning the award at that point. And it might go right and but I'm going to try anyway, because the process of putting this film together in a week and trying to make some story and some message, I'm learning from that. So I think that's another big lesson is the process, the journey. It's all that unfolding, all that learning is really good for me and helps me be more courageous. So I made this film and it's about sort of finding sunshine after the darkness. It's about the joy of the sea. It's about beach cleaning. It's about paddleboarding. It's about, and this is all in a 1-minute film, so there's quite a lot of messages, but it's basically joy, beach cleaning, paddleboarding, anxiety, all that stuff. And I submitted it, and instead of doubting myself at every turn and saying it might not be perfect, it might not be quite right, I didn't doubt myself. I just entered it, and I wrote it, and I entered it completely from the heart. And then this week, I found out that I'd won this 1 Minute Adventure Award. And I probably wouldn't have done it quite so positively, I think. I'd made other films before, but as I'd gone along, I'd sort of second guessed myself a bit. Whereas this one, I just put it out there, and the putting it out there was an accomplishment. It's all about for me, it's all about the process and the journey, as well as the ending and the accomplishment. And so, yeah, I think Paddleboard the North gave me a sense that I can trust myself and I can trust my judgment and I can trust myself to start something and see it through and make a difference. So, yeah, that's one of the things I learned.
Brilliant. And can we watch that film online? Is it available?
It's called Found at Sea. I'm going to put it up on YouTube and then sort of share it. So, yeah, it's just a little film about all the things that give me joy and hopefully help other women find joy too in little adventures and beach cleaning. Found at Sea, it's called.
And Jo, where can people find more information out about you and be inspired by your journey and follow you on social media?
I am at Healthy Happy 50. I'm on Instagram and Twitter, and I'm there kind of most days.
Fantastic. And I'll make sure I put those links on the show notes. But Jo, before we go, I'd love for you just to leave a final message for our listeners. And I'd love to just focus it on being brave in general for women. What would you say to those women?
I would say that the magic is in there. And sometimes in life, the magic and the bravery and the courage and the joy can kind of get knocked out of you, or so many other experiences can be like layers, and they can sort of just cover all those amazing things and all that magic and all that bravery inside you. And sometimes it's a process of excavating that almost and saying, okay, I'm going to unlearn all those things about me that say that I'm not brave, that I'm not good enough, that I'm not strong enough. Because I really, truly believe that deep down inside we are. And so many women in their everyday lives are brave in terms of all the things that they juggle and all the things that they have to do. And the person that, goes to the school events and stands up for their kids and fights in their corner for them or for their parents or for their friends. So I would just say that you already are brave. You just need to excavate it and remember that. And then just start now, start today, start just as you are. And you don't know where it's going to take you. I had no idea that it would take me to where it's taken me or the joy that it's given me. And I still don't know where it's going to take me. But just to remember that the magic is in you and that you are already very, very brave.
And Jo, thank you so much for being so brave, and thank you for coming and thank you for coming on the Tough Girl podcast to share more of your journey. It's been absolutely inspiring.
Thank you so much.
Hey tribe, I hope you enjoyed the episode with Jo, an absolute legend. So everything that we have talked about today will be available in the show notes at toughgirlchallenges.com. If you're brand new to the podcast, my name is Sarah Williams. I'm the host of the Tough Girl podcast and the founder of Tough Girl Challenges, which is all about motivating and inspiring women and girls while also increasing the amount of female role models in the media. So how I do that is by doing these incredible interviews with these amazing women, all ages, all backgrounds, doing a whole variety of different challenges. We are probably coming up to around 300 interviews now, which is absolutely amazing. So if you go and visit toughgirlchallenges.com, you'll be able to find out more information about all of our previous guests that we've interviewed. The Tough Girl podcast has been going since the 4th of August 2015, so there is a huge amount of content out there. And one of the reasons that I'm able to produce this content on a regular basis is due to the financial support of patrons. If you want to support the Tough Girl podcast, if you want to support the mission to increase the amount of female role models in the media, then please do go and visit patreon.com, patreon.com/Tough Girl podcast. It takes less than 2 minutes to sign up, and you can sign up for $2 or $5 a month. Female patrons $5 and above are invited to join the closed Facebook group, the Tough Girl Tribe. And I just wanted to share a little bit more about the Tough Girl Tribe and what it does and share this really, really wonderful story. So the Tough Girl Tribe is an online community, an online Facebook group that I've created to pull together the patrons and supporters as well as the guests of the Tough Girl podcast. And it's a way to get more of a connection with myself. I'm in there, daily responding to questions, but it's an incredibly supportive, encouraging group of people, because I sometimes realize that, if you mention to a family member or to a friend, hey, I want to go run the Marathon des Sables halves, or I want to stand up paddleboard across the country, I want to do a race or a challenge. Not everybody is going to be supportive, and that can be really, really tough to deal with. And sometimes what you need is encouragers in your life. You need people to say, do you know what, that is a brilliant idea. How can I support you? How can I help? What extra bits of information do you need? What support can I give you? And that's what the Tough Girl Tribe does. And one of our members, Gemma McCubbin, back in early 2017, she asked members of the Tough Girl Tribe if they would mind completing an open-ended questionnaire to help her with her university dissertation. And obviously the Tough Girl Tribe stepped up and were incredibly helpful. And Gemma just wants to say, obviously, that she's eternally grateful to everybody. And when I read her dissertation, there was actually a lovely acknowledgement at the beginning to the members of the Tough Girl Tribe and to myself. So Gemma, thank you so much. That was really kind of you to put that in there. So Gemma actually shared this in 2017, but she ended up picking up like a serious knee injury, which forced her to put her studies on hold. However, she has submitted her university degree and her dissertation, and she got a first in both the paper and her degree, which, oh my, I am like brimming with pride. So she wrote a dissertation. The title was Women in the Outdoors, Perceived Barriers and Benefits. And it's an amazing read. And Gemma, you've done an incredible job. And do you know what? Research like this is so, so important. It helps to understand what the perceived barriers are and the actual barriers are and what the benefits are for women out there. You know, one of the things that did come up was role models. And that's something that I've been working on for the past 5 or 6 years to increase the amount of female role models in the media. But it's everybody who supports the work like this. So Gemma, massive congratulations. I'm so proud of you. I know every single member of the Tough Girl Tribe is really, really proud of you. Well done for all your hard work, your commitment, and I can't wait to see what you're going to do in future. Following on from that, I do just want to say a massive thank you to all of the patrons and supporters of the Tough Girl podcast for your belief in what I'm doing. You know, if you've been inspired by the Tough Girl podcast, if it's made you smile, if it's made you laugh, if it's made you get out and go for a run, if it's made you get on your indoor exercise bike or your indoor rower, if it's made you face a difficult situation, if it's given you the confidence to take on a new challenge or a new adventure, then I'd love for you to pay it forward. And you can do that in, one of many ways. One of them is to tell one friend about the Tough Girl podcast. The second thing is to share the Tough Girl podcast. Take a screenshot and share it on Instagram. Tag me in it, because then I can share it, on my Instagram stories as well. Share it on Facebook. Share it on LinkedIn. Pin it on Pinterest. Use your power and influence on social media. Retweet, podcast episodes that have inspired you. Tag the guests that have inspired you. Go and tag Joan at Healthy Happy 50, saying how much you've enjoyed this episode and what you've taken away from it. Because I am a one-woman show banging the drum to get the message of the Tough Girl podcast out there. And if you can help me get that message out there, that would mean a huge amount. And thirdly, if you are in a financial position where you can pay it forward, $2 a month, $5 a month, it would make a huge difference to the work that I'm doing. All it takes is for you to go and sign up via Patreon, patreon.com/Tough Girl Podcast. But wherever you are, whatever you are doing, give it your all, give it 110%, get after it, go for it, live your best life. But I will be back with you next Tuesday for another awesome episode of the Tough Girl Podcast. Next Tuesday on the 26th of May, we're going to be speaking with Ursula Martin, who's going to be sharing more about her journey with ovarian cancer and walking 3,700 miles around Wales. There's also a couple of Tough Girl Extra podcast episodes coming out as well. So this Thursday, we're going to be catching up with Arita Bajans, who's a fascinating individual as well. He's going to be sharing more about her adventures in Papua New Guinea. Take care, lots of love, and I'll speak to you soon. Bye.